Right, let's try and get some analysis on this historic summit. Historic in the sense that it was the first one for Joe Biden. And to give us a sense of what we can make of what happened, we speak now to David Monyae, who's the director of the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. Dr. Monyae, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you.
Thank you.
All right, so what do you make of what happened behind closed doors based solely on what you heard both presidents say?
I think this is a good start. Looking at the body language, one could tell that it was a successful meeting, given the fact that we all went to this summit not expecting anything tangible. The outcome, quite interesting in terms of ambassadors of both countries going back after such a terrible time in which they were expelling each other's diplomats. And on key issues that affect global peace and security, I think there's some understanding and the establishment of task teams that are going to look in those issues. The arms race, issues of nuclear, as well as dealing with issues such as conflicts in Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, and how best the two major powers could discuss and find ways of alleviating the situation on the ground.
What do you think has changed between January and now? What's happened in the interim?
I think what we are seeing is a realization, particularly in Washington, that all-out wars, whether it's in Libya, in Syria, Afghanistan, are not really bringing, including Iraq, are not bringing any tangible results. And therefore, instead of continuing these wars of choice, I think the new administration of Biden's administration is trying really to reach out to Russia, a key player that is also contesting, particularly in areas where it's closer to Russia, Ukraine, Crimea. So those are critical areas where they really want to find common ground and easy tension, avoiding military buildups in those areas, as well as dealing with a much major issue that is affecting both countries, which is the cyber attack that is worsening in the United States as well as in Russia.
One gets a sense, especially when you hear what President Putin said when he referred to President Biden. He said he's a man of experience. One gets a sense that Joe Biden is an experienced, seasoned campaigner and perhaps knows which buttons to push and at what point.
Indeed, no doubt about it. I think there's a mutual respect, given the fact that when you look at Biden, he has been in government since early 70s, and he's well experienced, particularly in foreign affairs, and equally so, President Putin, former KGB, I think he was in Germany during the Cold War. He fully understands the situation, and therefore I don't think they would waste time speaking to each other in an antagonistic way. However, most of the rhetoric is much more speaking to the base. President Biden wants to be seen by American people as a very strong leader that is going to stand for American norms and values, which also became a real crisis in which President Putin pushed back. He constantly responded to questions by journalists that the United States need to look domestically, where there's a lot of human rights abuses before blaming Russia on how it is treating the opposition.
But he didn't answer any questions, did he really, Putin? And that's kind of classic Putin. He's always deflecting and saying, what about you? What about that? What about this? He doesn't even bother mentioning Navalny's name by name at all.
I think it was his own way of not discussing certain issues, particularly of the Navalny story. he sees that as a domestic affair, and the United States has no business in that area. And therefore, his answers were much more dismissal in a way that please preoccupy yourself with January 6 riots at the Hill, deal with Black Lives Matter United States, deal with issues of bombing in all these wars that the United States has been waging, and a lot of people have been killed. And therefore, I think it is, you have no right to talk to us about human rights. So it's something that the United States need to look into as it advances on the right path in terms of discussing issues of human rights.
So do you think that both parties could look at their bases and appear as if they came out with some kind of win?
They have absolutely no choice. I don't think they can sustain the current standoff. And therefore, I think the major issue is to have the ambassadors back into their positions. And number two, also to deal with other emerging new issues, especially if you look at the new weapons that are being developed recently, the supersonic, that require a new way of looking at them and how best to cooperate to ensure that you don't have accidental wars that's going to affect the entire world. So I think those discussions are necessary, and the entire world is looking forward to see easing of tension of these biggest countries with the largest stockpile of nuclear in the world.
So do you see this as a first engagement, and that they will deal with the thornier issues as they build some kind of rapport? Because cybersecurity is a major one, isn't it? I mean, Russia denies. In the meantime, you've got ransomware shutting down whole American infrastructures.
I really do not think that the two countries can resolve this matter on their own. I think this is a global matter that requires the negotiation at the UN level, involving all countries, and ensure that there are rules and regulations that regulate the entire cyber space, how countries should cooperate in terms of dealing with this crisis. However, the two seem to be at each other's throat, and I think they're mainly speaking to their base, the electorals at home. And however, we might see some movements in terms of exchange of prisoners on one hand, cooperation in the Antarctica in terms of navigation of ships, as well as dealing with other issues of conflict, including issues such as COVID-19 and how best to cooperate within the international system.
What about Ukraine? I mean, that is it's a tricky one. That's not. Is it also going to be something that the international community has to deal with collectively?
I think the two are critical, given the fact they're both supporting, United States supporting the government, as well as Russia supporting certain elements in parts of Ukraine. And therefore, I think they are required to continuously negotiate, ensure that there ease tensions and negotiations among Ukrainians is the best solution. I do not think if United States alone can resolve issues in Ukraine, nor will Russia resolve issues in Ukraine on its own. I think anti-Ukrainian negotiations is the best way out, with the support of both Russia and the United States.
Vladimir Putin is Vladimir Putin, and I think there's probably an acceptance that America does not expect him to change much. Perhaps it's trying to get some kind of behavior levels to manageable levels. Might that be the way to proceed?
Indeed. However, he is an important player in the international system. The media, I think, has a negative, in Western media in particular, approach on the man, but he's a critical player. He's required to be listened to, and He commands a formidable force with really dangerous weapons that can destroy the world, and therefore he has to be taken serious. I think this meeting is a start. We were expecting results coming with time, managing the domestic audience in the United States as well as in Russia. But this meeting, one would say it was a fruitful meeting.
I believe that for 2 hours it was just the two presidents and their Secretary of State and the Foreign Minister. That must have been quite a tough conversation, probably the most frank of the discussions they were able to have.
Indeed, I think this is following other discussion that has been going on. You had Reagan and Gorbachev discussing more or less similar, even heavier issues than what Biden and Putin are discussing today. But time has changed and issues have also changed quite dramatically. There's also an elephant in the room that was not mentioned by name. That is China. For United States, I think even though without saying it openly, United States finds itself in a catch-22. On one hand, has issues with Russia, but on the other, United States is concerned with the closeness between Beijing and Moscow. And therefore, these are some of the moves to try to win over Russia, so to go for China.
Dr. Monyae, thank you so much. Your insights always greatly appreciated. Thanks for your time.